some are born to endless night. The sky.
Hi, this is Justin Coletti of Sonic Scoop, and welcome back for some more MixCon. Today, we have got a mix walkthrough with an amazing producer and engineer, the one and only Joel Hamilton. He has worked with a wide array of artists, from Tom Waits to Paul McCartney, from the Black Keys to Pretty Lights, Highly Suspect, and today he's going to be walking us through a really interesting mix from an artist called Sparklehorse. Joel works out of Studio G in Brooklyn, and his approach and philosophy to mixing and music production has been really influential to me over the years. Super excited to have him on. This one is free to the public thanks to our friends over at Plugin Alliance, and you'll see that Joel really integrates both analog and digital tools in his workflow. He does this mix on his SSL console there at Studio G, and whenever he's not on the SSL console, he's constantly using the SSL console emulation by Brainworks and Plugin Alliance. But in addition to using the EQs on the console, you also see him use digital tools, such as the Kirchhoff EQ from Plugin Alliance. And he'll talk a bit about how he integrates both digital and analog tools into his workflow, as well as give you his overall philosophy and vision for mixing, and in particular, working on projects like this one that have really interesting and unusual arrangements, unlike what you might find as the standard fare in so many popular music productions. If you want to check out any of the Plugin Alliance tools you see in this presentation, just go over to plugin-alliance.com, where you can try out their whole mega subscription for 30 days, or try out any of their individual plugins for 2 weeks. Really excited to hear what Joel does with this one along with you. A couple quick notes before we get into it. Number one, we've got a whole bunch more MixCon masterclasses coming your way. Make sure you don't miss any more of the live premieres over at mix-con.com. That's mix-con.com. Also, we're giving away thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of free gear in the MixCon mega giveaway. We'll have links to that down below, so be sure to check those out. You got 3 chances to win, so good luck to you. We'll also be having a live Q&A with Joel right after the premiere of this presentation ends. So if any questions pop into your head as you're watching the premiere, go ahead and type them into the chat box, and we will save the best ones to ask Joel during the live Q&A. Big thanks to Joel for doing this one. Big thanks to the family of Mark Linkus, the artist Sparklehorse, for allowing us to go under the hood of this mix. And big thanks to Plugin Alliance for helping make this one free to the public. Without any further ado, let's get right into it. Joel, take it away.
Hi, I'm Joel Hamilton, and I'm here at Studio G along with Sonic Scoop and Plugin Alliance for MixCon 2023. And today we're going to be talking about the song Skull of Lucia by Sparklehorse off the new record Bird Machine on Anti Records. So working on this Sparklehorse record was way different because I don't have access to the original artist. He's no longer with us. Sadly, Mark passed away in 2010, and here I am mixing this thing in 2023. The thing that's interesting is that the original records that I worked on for the Sparklehorse records, we always used interesting, cool, and weird, esoteric analog gear. Barely anything digital was used whatsoever, but this time around I'm using a hybrid approach, combining the SSL console, lots of the outboard gear that you see behind me, along with plugins from places like Plugin Alliance to help me get the sound that we need for a release that comes out today. Before we get into the mix, I want to talk a little bit about how we work here at Studio G. It's basically a hybrid approach between the SSL console and plugins that I use in the box to feed an individual channel. So basically in this case, let's say on the main vocal, Mark's vocal always has this really cool disembodied feel to it, super gentle, but sometimes there can be artifacts that I need to get rid of before it runs out into the analog gear I'm using to process it. So I'll use something really accurate, something that plugins are so good at, like the Kirchhoff EQ, where I can just notch out things that aren't quite working. Using the plugins in the box helps me shape the sound to where I want it right when it shows up at the console. It's like I've already done corrective EQ and some mild compression in the box just to give myself the exact signal I want to feed to the SSL, so it sits in the mix before I even start working on it to color it with analog EQs and analog effects and equipment. Basically, I'm just going to take everybody through how we make decisions about sounds that there's not really much historical precedent for. I'll get into that more as we listen to each sound. But how do we judge better or worse in this context when it's noises, or there's something that's not just how the Stones did it, or we can't look at how Brower did it, or, there's we don't have a historical precedent when there's just there's a snare vocal relationship, but there's not really an easy reference point to put up somebody else's mix and say, oh, okay, this is how loud the cuckoo clock noise is, or, oh, okay, that's how loud I should put the electronics compared to the broken old Optagon, or things that just people have never heard before. But so we'll be looking at compositional intention as the guiding principle. Why does it exist? Why was it written? And what's the song supposed to say? Because if we read into just the writing of the song itself, the sort of spirit of it, the mood that it creates in the room, you start to understand that you're guided through the process by the song itself, where having a particular sound land on one of these channels that pushed up too far, it snaps you out of the mood that the singer, the primary songwriter, the main sounds in the song are trying to achieve. The mood that it's creating in the room is the intention. That is the compositional intention. So that's going to help guide us to final levels. Got xylophone, strings, electro percussion, crash cymbal, really simple drums, bass synth, vocals, just a bunch of stuff. Nylon string guitar, steel string guitar, the main vocal, obviously, 2 different mellotrons, an Optagon, piano, and just some noise from an Optagon. Let's see what we got here.
Across the sand, never had no father, showed me to water for you to drink.
So right here, we just even have a track that's just labeled noise, and it says noise from the Optagon. So yet again, it's one of those things where, how loud is it? What is it saying to the listener to have that up? Is it supposed to sound vintage, like the sepia tone pictures that people took in the 80s at the mall where they made your dad hold like a Pilgrim gun? Is it that type of song? It's not. It's now, it's current. But it has sort of a dusty artifact feeling, like you found it in your grandma's attic in a certain way, but somehow magically lives today. We're trying to give that illusion anyway. So there's a parallel compressor send that's also being EQ'd outboard here. I'm using an Iron Age EQ up at the top here, and I'm using an Aphex Studio Dominator as my parallel drum compressor, which is a pretty weird choice usually for people.
Too sweet the light, and some are born to endless night. The sky, the old school of Lycia, with me.
See, so we have these harmonies kicking in there. Overall, I'd like to just hear the vocal pulled a bit forward. And I'm only making that decision because of the fact that the primary focus in this one is that sort of intimate, dry, deliberately sort of limited bandwidth main voice that's just delivered so gently. So I'm going to start EQing that at the console, and then we'll listen to the compression hatched in here.
Never had no father, showed me to water for you to drink, like that whole thing. Some are born too sweet the light, and some are born to endless night. The sky, the old school of Lucia.
So I'm just using that distressor and a relatively obscure compressor called the Magnatech, which was made here in New York a long time ago. It's probably barely doing anything right now. I didn't even look. That's on the insert. The distressor is on the tape out. Super late release. And it's to just give some snap to that really gentle vocal delivery. Just the sort of leading edge needs to sound like the person's like right there, the leading edge of the attack of every single word.
Don't hold my hand.
So basically, I've got a couple different compressors patched in outboard, one on the tape out and one on the insert, which is post EQ, post console EQ. I've also got the console's compressor and the expander gate just to take some of the noise in between the lines out of the voice. Now on the screen, when I'm looking at the vocal, I wind up with something like the Kirchhoff EQ in the box, so I can really just notch out very specific frequencies and use the SSL EQ at the console as a tonal shaping tool. I'll even use the Kirchhoff as a discovery tool in the sense of being able to make a really tight notch and kind of push it up, listen to a problem frequency, and then pull it down. It's the old seek and destroy EQ method. In this case, I'm looking at the de-esser and the Kirchhoff at the same time here, and I can take a look at how much I'm pulling back with the de-esser. Fairchild 660 by Universal Audio. I've got the Neve 1084 plug-in as well, and that's coming out and running through the patch that we have here in the analog domain. So it's a hybrid situation on the vocal for sure.
Don't hold my hand across the sand.
I've also got an in-the-box mult that's coming out of a pair of channels right next to the main vocal, which has some drive on it. I'm just using the old SansAmp plugin, apparently. But that's coming out in parallel alongside the main vocal, just for some urgency.
Don't hold my hand across the sand. Never had no father, showed me to water for you to drink, like that whole thing.
So for me, the key here is that if this was a movie, there would be a narrative arc to it. And anything that happens along the way needs to be in support of that narrative. So if when we bring things in, when things go away, those are like characters that enter and leave the scene. It's the same thing here where the main singer is saying something. We've got the main vocal, which is clearly the focal point in this track. And then all of a sudden when we get to the chorus, we've got a bunch of harmonies and extra vocals that support that. And it kind of opens up. It gives us this sort of airier feeling in the chorus that finally this dreamy moment has been achieved. We're not just in this kind of clockwork, dusty cuckoo clock part of the track anymore, part of the story. It gets less narrative and almost impressionistic in my brain when we move into the chorus of this song. So without using any kind of reverb or anything, it still feels like things open up and get wider because we've got additional instrumentation like the strings and the some extra guitars that kick in the chorus. And so I can lean on those to supply a sense of kind of flying off the cliff, of things opening up, rather than relying on effects like delays and verbs in this case. Because it stays kind of, it's weird. It's like describing a dream in a bedroom about a big space rather than actually being in a big space where we would need the reverb or something to say, okay, we're in a missile silo now, or we're in this big cavernous, Grand Canyon area. I can tell that story in a way that feels direct without putting reverb on my voice.
And some are born to endless night. The sky, the old school of Lucia. With me, she will never see her in the days or in the night, like stars being born or time being torn could have all ended.
I mean, just even pushing up the strings and those backing vocals, it's amazing how legato, sort of dreamy the track gets there, rather than feeling like this sort of broken wind-up toy that the song starts as. It really starts to fly there because of all these legato, beautiful elements that kick in. It's the gentle nature of the track, I think, that really is something that needs to be preserved even when things sort of open up in the chorus. It's still very gentle. It's like it can be sung to a baby rather than something that you picture like in an arena rock song or something. So yet again, there's not much in the way of a precedent other than maybe some kind of Beatles songs or things that were sort of gentle and opened up big, but not much. I can't really think of anything historically that actually has like a broken noise sound in it. And, this particular grouping of tracks like electronics and nylon string guitar, things like this. I think in general, when we're looking for what could make a mix better, we wind up with something that's almost as subtle as a moral compass, in the sense that we're affected by everything from your fourth grade teacher or, your religion or whatever your belief system is, or even potentially something that somebody said to you, at a truck stop when you stop to get a snack when you're driving across country. There's no way to guess the number of variables that ultimately affect the decisions that we make each day. And I think that's why some people just call it instinct when they sit in front of a console or they sit in front of a group of tracks. They're like, I don't know, I just feel that it's right. But that feeling comes from somewhere. And in my opinion, it always comes from really listening to what the track wants to be, rather than having your own agenda and trying to sort of impose that on a group of variables. So we wind up with a bunch of tracks here that we're in charge of leaving somewhere. This fader's got to sit somewhere in the final mix. And so finding better or worse is like an aesthetic compass with all of the history of you listening to other records, things that have influenced you since you were a kid. For me, when I was 6 years old, hearing Debussy or something equally obvious like that, play some major third or whatever, it was like I got the chills, and it was as physical a response as if I walked outside right now and I can feel the sun on my skin. I can't reach out and grab it or hold it to show you, but we all know it's real when we feel the sun come through the clouds and you feel it on your skin. It was like that, like hearing a particular interval that was inspiring and gave me a physical response. That's sort of what I've been in pursuit of since I was a kid. And in the mix, that's been a part of what guides everything for me. That's my aesthetic compass, is sort of thinking back to whatever gave me the chills or gave me the goosebumps in that way. And there's always a set of priorities in a limited system. Like if we don't have infinite amount of headroom on the console or in your mix bus in Pro Tools, the only thing we can do is budget, right? It's prioritizing. If you don't have infinite money, you prioritize. You save up for one thing, you forsake maybe something else. Maybe you don't need new boots yet, so you can get a new microphone. You can like skip it that year, you know? So we have to prioritize within a finite system. This is a finite system. None of the people who've ever mixed records ever had infinite headroom, infinite EQs, infinite ways to adjust the sound. It was finite. And so when we prioritize, what are the elements that we actually need to choose to tell this story correctly? It's sort of like we want to inconvenience the least amount of electrons on the way to telling this story, right? Just like you want to use the least number of words to describe a particular event when you're a journalist. You know, you're trying to take up physically less space on the page and still convey the same amount of information. It's just efficiency. It's more clear. The way that we work with the speakers, because ultimately they're motors, it's like we wind up reducing intermodulation distortion by being clear in our decisions. Please produce this sound at this moment, and kind of ignore the other stuff, you know? So when we're clear about our intention, we wind up being able to, quote, tell the speakers how to be clear in what comes out of them. If everything's sort of equal parts, they're just kind of trying to do 16 things at once, we're never going to have the type of punch or impact or emotional connection that we would have if you just have the vocal way out front or the violin way out front or whatever you really want the listener to pay attention to at any given moment in the arrangement. I'm going to listen to the chorus a bit more because it's where everything is happening in this song. Like it's the densest this song gets.
The sky. School of Lycia. With me. She will never see us in the day. Or in the night, like stars.
So that's putting a Chandler Zener limiter on the nylon string guitar just to kind of pull that forward. I've high passed it. That's the only EQ that's on it right now, is just high passing it, which is pre-compressor. That's adding whatever frequency that was, 10K shelf on the harmonies as a group. So they're all being sort of stemmed out to 2 channels on the console. So I'll take 10 vocal tracks, send them out an aux in the box, and then come out 2 channels on the console, just stereo, rather than taking up all the channels on the console. Just deal with them as a stereo group. So I'm just kind of sweetening them like a stem here. With the EQ on the console, which is an SSL 8048 G+, so it's basically the same thing as a 4000 G+ EQ section. Something I really like using is the Brainworks E channel. Once I get it off of the SSL channels, it's like I have the same thing working in the computer after I've made all the shapes that I need on the console. We print them into the Pro Tools rig, and I can continue EQing, compressing, gating. All the things that I love about working analog are available to me in plugin form. it's a way to take this console into every single room that we have here. You know, it's like a to-go cup.
The sky.
So that's just adding a little bit of BX10, actual AKG BX10 spring reverb, the big spring, to the strings and the xylophone. There's a little bit on the nylon and there's a little bit on the steel guitar, and starts to kind of give some space, a sense of space around those elements, so that what we wind up with is a real sense of front to back. It's like depth of field, where I want to give the illusion the things that are slightly blurrier obviously sit behind the things like the singer that's perfectly in focus. So adding verb sort of softens the edges and puts that farther back in our shot here.
The sky. Like stars being born, or time being torn, could have all ended right then and there, and be ghosts in the morn. The sea highway to fade, spread me aground.
So on the nylon string guitar, I do have some stuff yet again coming out of an aux in Pro Tools, going into an aux in Pro Tools, and then the aux is sending out of a pair of channels on the SSL console. And I'm using a Fairchild 660 plugin, again by UAD, on that aux, and that's what's coming out to channel 2122 on the console, and then I'm running that through the Chandler Zener hardware. So again, a combination of compressors on this one. I don't know how much the Fairchild's pulling back. Let's look. So barely at all. The plugin's not doing much at all. It's doing like a dB here or there, less than a dB. So it's kind of for tone, just kind of chilling it out a little bit. I might be adding some gain with it. Yeah, I'm adding some gain as well because it just wasn't tracked very loud. I mean, nylon string isn't very loud. Same thing on the piano. There's actually a weird parallel bus thing happening here with an API 2500 plugin, the Kirchhoff EQ, and the built-in Pro Tools 7-band EQ, which was delivered to me that way from the people that were working on it before me just kind of getting mixes together in the box, and I just left it alone because so much was shaped around these tones. Meaning the overdubs happen sort of, when you've got something that becomes the bedrock of the track, pulling the rug out from under it for no good reason isn't always a great idea, even if it's like a plug-in that you wouldn't normally use. Just leave it on there, commit it. Because as a mix engineer, the last thing you want to do is all of a sudden deliver something that's completely contrary to the artist's funhouse mirror of self-perception, because we can never guess what that is. And so if they've advanced an aesthetic when they send it to you, it's best to run with that aesthetic in my experience. And usually, again, because that's in line with compositional intention, especially if it was the artist themselves that were working on it. I didn't have access to the artist in this case. They're no longer with us. And so there was no way for me to get direct feedback from the person who wrote the song. So what we're left with is actually kind of an amazing example of having to follow a breadcrumb trail left by the composer when you actually say with your choices, with your priorities within a finite system, I'd like the xylophone to be the thing that feels very close. I'm going to have the xylophone be the bright element that happens when I'm not singing, and I'm going to, the arrangement starts to tell you, then I'm going to hand that energy off to the vocal. And once I stop singing again, or maybe I'm going to sing with a bunch of friends in the chorus, and it starts really feeling, like the warmth of the sun kind of happens there when all of the harmonies kick in. There's a physicality to it that to me shows intention in writing. Sometimes when I'm doing pre-production, I'll have people playing just a single guitar part along with the drummer, let's say, and just by watching how much, or seeing the metering when you're recording someone, how much they dig into the strings in a particular part, you can start to get a plan together of like, okay, we're going to need to double something there. This is where the guitar runs out of gas for them when they're trying to like make it get bigger than it's capable of getting. And that becomes a marker. I mean, that's a physical cue behind the compositional intention. Like that intention is, this should get giant here. And the guitar and amp combo, let's say in this example, just doesn't get as big as they would like it to get. That's when we're going to have a double or a triple of the guitar kick in and supply all of that muscle that they were trying to give the illusion of just by hitting the strings really hard. We can sort of chill out, let the instrument do its work in a range where it still sounds good, and then have a bunch of friends show up to help, instead of just stressing one single speaker. It's kind of the concept of having one thing doing a lot versus a lot of things doing a little together. Again, that starts to happen here where I have multiple compressors stacked up and each one is only doing a little bit, kind of like shellac or varnish, where you can't just take the whole bucket and throw it all on the table and expect it to be really extra shiny. It's like a bunch of little layers. That's what makes it really, really shiny in the end. Let's look at what we've got for drums here, because it's not the traditional drum set. It's all separate elements that are pretty unique and weird. Let's see, where does it start here? And for the most part, I'm leaving those alone EQ-wise, aside from the fact that there's a bunch of EQ on my parallel send. So the more that I put the parallel, the more I send to the parallel from my channel, the more I get that EQ curve rather than the original shape of it at the dry channel. So let me just back off the parallel on and off for a second here so you can hear that. So it's not just gain. There's some compression there, obviously, but again, in parallel, so it's not completely smashing them. But there's also an EQ curve there, some low end, kind of this shift the mid character of the snare, and then a little bit of top end. And again, that's on the Iron Age EQ there, which I love those things.
Don't hold my hand across the sand. Never had no father. Showed me to water for you to drink. Like that old thing. Some are born to sweet the light, and some are born to endless night. The sky. School of Lucia. She will never see in the days or in the light. Like stars being born, or time being torn, could have all ended right then and there, and be ghosts in the morn. The sea highwayed and tried to fade, spat me aground, got found and drowned, and so I stayed dry, but slightly torn and frayed. The crown around her head it played, and its spine made from the sun.
So you can hear that final on Bird Machine, which is the album. It's a song called Skull of Lucia by Sparklehorse. Thank you to Plug-in Alliance, Sonic Scoop, and everybody involved with bringing this to you.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that MixCon masterclass with the one and only Joel Hamilton, really one of my favorite producers and mixers out there. Absolutely love to hear this guy talk about audio, and we're going to be talking to him some more. Check out the live Q&A that we're doing with Joel. If you're here for the live premiere, this is coming on right after it, and if you're here in the future, there's going to be a link for that down below. Big thanks again to the artist, and big thanks to Plugin Alliance for making this one free to the public. If you want to check out any of the Plugin Alliance plugins that you saw in this presentation, just go over to plugin-alliance.com, where you can try out anything that they make for free for 2 weeks, or get their whole mega subscription bundle and get a 30-day free trial of it. One of the biggest steals in the world of pro audio, in my humble opinion. Thanks again for hanging out with me for this MixCon masterclass. This has been Justin Coletti of Sonic Scoop. Hope to see you in the next one.
Some are born to endless night. The sky